Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
8 minutes after 8, welcome to the Forum at 8 here on SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. Well, on Tuesday I made reference to an article, an email that's been circulating about the allegations on what happened in Marikana and the involvement of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. The article is headlined, Marikana Massacre, all this to protect an oligarch. And it goes on just to make a whole lot of allegations. So this morning then, we are very fortunate to have in our studios Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa to come and respond to some of these allegations, but also just give us a perspective of what happened at Marikana. What is his view about Marikana? Mr. Ramaphosa, I thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Xolani. It's good to be with you and to have your listeners listening.
And thanks indeed for your time. Firstly, I must start with this article because, and you know, I'm just going to read the first paragraph for our listeners to understand what the article says. It starts off by saying, amidst all the confusion after the shooting of 44 protesting miners at Lonmin's Marikana Platinum Mine in South Africa, we should not lose sight of the astonishingly simple underlying issues. We are told the workers are demanding that their wage be raised to 12,500 Rand per month, but the workers claim their salary is already at this level. They say they are subcontracted by a company owned by billionaire South African oligarch Cyril Ramaphosa. He only pays them 5,400 or less and pockets the rest. I would like us to start with this allegation. It's a serious allegation. Do you own a company that is taking money from the workers?
Well, it is a serious allegation and quite a sensational one for that matter. Of course, the truth is we do not, Shanduka does not, or nor do I own a company that's involved in labor broking, because that's precisely what the allegation is. So the only involvement we have with Lonmin is that we're a shareholder, and a shareholder who invested 300 million, and the 300 million, which is completely underwater, it's almost lost because the value at which we invested has really substantially gone down. And we have no other involvement with Lonmin, and we do not do labor broking. We do not have a company that does that type of thing. And it is something that we would never do. Why would we go and rob workers and form a company like that and take money from the company and pay them half of what the workers should be getting? We would never do something like that, and it's completely outrageous.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about your involvement with Lonmin. You own about 9% of Lonmin as Shanduka. But there's an allegation also made in the very same article about how you came to own that 9%. Apparently, Lonmin paid a lot of money in order for you to be on board.
Lonmin did what you could call an empowerment deal some years ago, where it had a number of entities that were shareholders in the BE structure called Ingwala. And the workers themselves were part of that structure. And when the financing arrangement were a bit difficult, we saw an opportunity to get into the boots of those empowerment entities. We invested 300 million of our own money. Then Lonmin did a vendor financing arrangement for us to be part of the deal, which in the end, the whole deal was worth 2.8 billion Rand. Now, a vendor financing arrangement is very common in all structures. For instance, in Shanduka itself, we vendor financed a group of women entities to be part of the shareholding structure of Shanduka. We financed them. And there's an interest charge that goes with that. Similarly, in Lonmin, after we paid the 300 million, we were financed to a tune of 2.5 billion. And it's as good as going to a bank. So the interest rates are bank-related. There's nothing like a sweetheart deal that we got. And we then paid out the number of other black entities that were part of this structure, including the workers. The workers who were part of that initial BE structure were paid out substantial amounts of money when we bought in. And our commitment has also been that we want to do another BEE structure for the workers, so that the workers must also be equity players in the company that they work for. And a community entity is also part of the Lonmin Empowerment.
I'm going to come back to the comment you made, because you say that the 300 million rand is under the water, effectively all down the drain at the moment.
Indeed.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But this article, together with Julius Malema, among others, have then said 34 miners were killed to protect your asset. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's not to protect our asset, because for all intents and purposes, I mean, you could say that that money is lost, and it's money that we invested, and indeed that has gone underwater, and we accept it as such, because that's the risk that every investor takes when you invest money. Now, the killing of the 34 miners is something that is deeply regrettable, and I have regretted it, and I felt deeply saddened by it. And the one time I was as saddened as I have been now was after the 1987 Great Miners' Strike, when 10 workers were killed during that whole struggle to get mine workers to earn a decent wage. And this time I've been as depressed as that.
But the impression created here is that if it wasn't Cyril Ramaphosa's asset, who is a high-ranking ANC member, who is connected, a well-known business person in South Africa, the workers would not have died. They died simply because it was your asset that they were defending.
But that is really untrue. I mean, there are other shareholders as part of the Lonmin shareholding structure. The IDC, which is government-owned, is part of the shareholding entity, and a number of others, the PIC and many others. So could you say that all those workers died to protect those assets? And I think it's quite a ludicrous type of allegation to make. It isn't true. This situation that we have now, sad as it is, could have happened at any given time. And it so happens that because I'm involved as a shareholder, I tend to be the highest tree that catches the fiercest wind, and it can't be true.
But are you surprised that you're the highest tree that catches the wind? Because you've been involved in the mining industry for many years. You led the NUM, and people are saying that you, of all the people, should know the conditions and should have acted to prevent what happened in one way or the other.
The conditions that workers are exposed to in the mining industry are not yesterday's creation. The mining industry, we must all remember, has been the repository of exploitation and oppression and apartheid in our country, and it spanned over hundreds of years. And to eradicate those type of conditions is not an overnight type of thing. It will take time, and steps have now been taken, and all many of us are saying is that Marikana must definitely be the turning point for this industry. It must change the landscape of how things are done, how workers are treated, how workers are accommodated, workers are paid, and indeed the collective bargaining process must also change. And in some ways it will also change mining methods. It needs also to address this whole issue of the migratory labor system. The Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe is already on record as saying we need to change it in such a way that it is put on an international benchmark type of footing, like they have in Australia. The mines in Australia are out in the outbacks of Australia, and they have workers who live near those mines in bachelor accommodation, but they go home regularly. And I believe that too can be possible in our own mining industry as we break this hold that the migratory labor system has had on us. And in a way, with the Marikana living conditions situation, is that mine workers, collectively including their unions, are a victim of their own success. We campaigned quite strongly in the 80s that the migratory labor system must be done away with and the hostels must be done away with. That's precisely what is happening now. The hostels are being done away with, but as that process is underway, another social ill emerges, which is squatter living, and the companies themselves obviously have a lot to do. I'm on record as saying mining companies have not lived up to the conditions or the prescriptions that are set out in the
charter.
mining charter.
But,
they haven't.
But significant shareholders like yourselves, then what are you doing to ensure that they live up to the mining charters?
All mining companies, including Lonmin, will tell you that they've got plans underway. They are already doing a lot of things. As it comes to Lonmin, in another 18 months' time, all the hostels will have been transformed into single living or family accommodation. So all those hostels that Lonmin used to have will have been transformed. The problem, though, is that as you transform them, you then begin to displace other workers who then opt for the living out allowance. And they say, I would rather make my own arrangements. And in that regard, mining companies as well as government need to have a collaborative effort to make sure that this success that has been achieved is not turned into a social evil. In the end, the mining companies need to accommodate each one of their workers in single accommodation.
The issue, though, at least at Lonmin, is that people are saying Lonmin should never have been surprised about it. In fact, Lonmin's own sustainability report highlighted some of these issues. Were you surprised when you saw this?
No, the sustainability report did raise this issue. And as I'm saying, Kolani, it's been a process of doing too little, too slowly, and in this case, too late. And this affects all of us. And I took heart from what the President said, that rather than be pointing fingers, let us find ways of acting together to do something about this so that a Marikana situation never, ever happens in our country again.
Let me go back to the point you made earlier about your investments in Marikana, that at the moment they're under the water.
Yeah.
Are you considering pulling out?
No, we're not considering pulling out. I think there is a commitment, unless our board says, this is an investment that we should write off, but I don't believe so. There is value in trying to turn this lemon into lemonade. There is something of value.
But what's wrong with the asset? Because people that have assessed the asset are saying that in the long term it's actually a good asset. Lonmin is a good asset.
Well, it is a good asset. It's got a very good ore body, but the cost structure has just been rising, and the settlement that has now been reached is going to put pressure on the costs of the company, and the pricing of the product now is at its lowest level. The world economy is not helping in this, and largely because platinum producers are price takers. They don't make the price. It would have been different if they made the price, but they take price, and you're dependent on all that and the costs.
I spoke to Professor Adam Habib a little earlier on, and he says, but why? Why do platinum producers take price? We're the only one. We produce about 80%. We can dictate the price.
It is easy to say you can dictate the price, but in the end, in South Africa alone, there are quite a number of producers. Lonmin, Amplats, and Impala are the key ones, but there are other smaller producers, and some of them are new entrants in the industry. They are BE shareholders, because if you're going to make the price, then you've got to be able to sometimes stop production. And when you stop production, it has an impact on your workers. Because, like for instance, De Beers in the past used to produce diamonds, and sometimes it would stop and stock those diamonds and hold back from supplying the market to push the price up. And if you were to do that also in platinum, you may force the consumers themselves to find alternative ways. So you've got to obviously try and maximize the price that you can get, but at the same time not to kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
You see, it's interesting you say that because part of the criticisms against your involvement with Lonmin is really that what is expected out of a black capitalist?
Yes.
Are we expecting something different? By way of example, there are so many emails that have come through about Cyril Ramaphosa buying a bull for 18.5 million, or bidding for a bull for 18.5 million, while people are hungry out there.
Yeah. Yes, I mean the criticism on this bull have been flying around, and it's something that I regret. It is I participated in an auction, and where I did put a bid, and that was a mistake on my part. It was a mistake. In the past, some people may recall that I was accused it was alleged that I had bought a car, a Maybach, worth 3 million rand. I
Yeah.
responded quickly because I did say that it would be a mistake to do something like that. And this time, I regret it. It was a mistake to even put up my hand to do so. And I've been chastised by some of my good comrades, and even before they chastised me, I did admit that that was a mistake.
Why was it
and
a
I
mistake?
regret. No, I regret it because I mean it is an excessive price in the sea of poverty. I belong to a community, and it was one of those moments when I was blindsided, and I regret it, and I apologize to people who have felt offended by it. And so I'm humble enough to say so.
Sure.
But the damage has been done, and I will live with it, and I accept that it is a mistake that that has happened. But putting that aside, I mean, I've never, in my entire life, I spent 9 years with mine workers, serving them and working for them. And in those 9 years, I've always championed their interests. And part of the successes that we now have in the mining industry were achieved during those years when mine workers stood firm and united in achieving their goals. And it's something that pleases me, but Marikana obviously has put a blemish, quite a bit of a blemish on that, on the collective bargaining system and all that. And Vavi was absolutely correct yesterday in saying that the Marikana wage settlement is a very dangerous precedent. And I agree with that. It is a dangerous precedent because it means that the collective bargaining system in the mining industry has actually been, torn apart. And
But what were the options? You living with a situation where 42 days of a strike, possibility of job losses, 46 lives have been lost.
Yeah.
You needed to be pragmatic.
yeah, in that regard, pragmatism was called for, and Lonmin itself could not opt for drastic options like dismissing workers. It could never do so. So a settlement had to be reached, but it is a settlement that sets a very, very bad and dangerous precedent. That now we've reached a stage where if workers complain about anything, they can opt out of the regular institutionalized collective bargaining system and get what they want. And the other important thing, of course, is that we need, moving forward, to remove violence, the use of violence in collective bargaining. And I've been surprised by this report in COSATU, or commissioned by COSATU, which says that workers now say that it is better to use violence.
Because of waning solidarity. They're saying that it's an easier way
Yes.
to get your demands because there isn't any more solidarity. But also, there's a lack of trust in the NUM and other union representatives.
Marikana should be a turning point for unions as well. They need to increase trusts in themselves, in their structures, in their leaders. I think there have been quite a number of gaps, and those gaps need to be looked at. And the union, the NUM itself, does need to use Marikana as a mirror to look at themselves more closely to see what they can do to reinvigorate their own union and to change the way things are
How do
done.
investors see South Africa after Marikana? In fact, I was before you answer, because I was at dinner where the diplomats were speaking, and somebody was saying, well, in fact, an ambassador from Brazil was saying, for a while the Brazilians thought South Africa was stable, but Marikana happened, and people started saying, hey, but wait a minute, what is happening in South Africa? What are they saying to you?
There are concerns. I don't think we can run away from the fact that there are concerns in the investor circles about where the situation is. But I don't think they are irreparable concerns. I mean, these are explainable problems. We can explain it. We can put it into context. And in the end, Marikana will be, in investors' terms, will be a blip. So we can explain, we can go out there and put the case for our country, because by all intents and purposes, South Africa is still a great destination for investors. That is precisely the message that we are putting out there, and saying that come and invest, Your money is safe. We've got a very, very good overall regulatory environment in the financial services and in every way. So I think we can explain what has happened.
Right, I'm talking to Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, a businessman. Of course, his company has about 9% shareholding in Lonmin, and we'll be taking your thoughts on these matters. 0891104208, but also I'll be opening the emails, gwalax@sabc.co.za. What do you think about what has happened? It's 27 after 8. Mr. Ramaphosa, I just want to, from a personal point of view, how do you feel at the moment about what has happened? 46 people are dead at Marikana. But just generally, how do you feel about that?
At a personal level, I found it devastating, very depressing, and very difficult to deal with. That 46 people died in the era of our democracy. In the past, I've seen people die on the mines, and that was in the apartheid era. And one hoped that we'd seen the back of all those terrible events. But to have had it happen now, it's rather sad. And to have had, people who are not so well paid resorting to these means of articulating their views has been, for me, a very low moment.
And then there are fingers of blame pointing at you as an investor. People, of course, are asking this question about African businessmen. Could Mr. Ramaphosa answer the question about what is different about an African businessman? A lot of fingers of blame are pointing towards your direction as an African businessman who has led the ANC, who has led still a leader of the ANC, who has led NUM. You should know the conditions of the workers, and you should be a catalyst for change.
That is a fair statement to make. We should expect that those of our own who get into these positions will seek to bring about changes. And we are a minority shareholder in Lonmin, just 9%. And I sit on the board. And when one sits on the board, one articulates the views that are aligned with what would be of great interest to our people. And and some of the good that is being done by the company, which is not known, which is not so well articulated, particularly after this horrible disaster that we've had, happens because they're articulated by some of the black board directors that there are, and there are 3 of us on that board, and we actually are on the side of our people. And quite often you cannot wave a magic wand, and some of these things take quite a while to happen, and change happens on a gradual basis, and sometimes we move forward with a few steps, and sometimes things don't change as you want them to do. And what I'm convinced about is that Lonmin will be a different company after this.
Is transformation difficult in the mining sector?
Transformation is especially difficult in the mining sector. It is a challenging task, but it is underway. And from now, the government is quite determined to make sure that the mining companies do transform. And I think we are going to see a change step in the mining industry, a change step that we've been calling for.
The ANC Youth League and others are suggesting, including some unions, are suggesting that one way to deal with this matter is to nationalize the mines.
Well, there is that view, and some of us don't agree with it because the government does its job best, in my view, as a regulator. Precisely what they are doing now, to regulate and to make sure that after this incident there should be a new landscape of doing things in the mining industry. And I'm reluctant on nationalization because when capital calls are made, do we want the state to go and pour down billions of rands in a hole in the ground, and sometimes exploring and find that there is nothing, when that money could have been used for other social needs? It is better for people who take the risk, like we did as Shanduka. We took the risk, and if we lose that money, it's not money that is lost for social needs.
But how do you make sure then that people comply with the charters?
You actually regulate and you enforce it, and you have the power as the state of granting a license. So the issue of the license is a critical one, and that is the power that the government has. If people don't comply with the conditions that you set out, you just close the tap. You take the license away. And every company that operates in the mining industry should know that there is that risk. that if you don't comply, the license can be taken away. And if that is enforced, we will see more and more regulatory compliance. And even as an investor in this type of business, I would say, yes, I do want my government to regulate very, very closely and make sure that we comply.
We're going to go to the lines then on 0891 104 208. Let's start with Paul in KZN. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Kolani.
Hi, welcome.
I just think, and hi, sir.
Hi, Paul.
I just think you don't fully appreciate the magnitude of this calamity in Marikana. South Africa expects from you leadership, and you're part of the board in Marikana. And just this morning in this same show, we are saying we are worried more about the settlement costs and the effects thereof. But one cannot expect that from you, Cyril, in a sense that you know the conditions that are there. If you cannot stand up, you of all people cannot stand up and even at this point, agreeing with people, agreed that the costs are high, but in the scheme of things, do you think what those workers, what they were fighting for and what happened there, and they're still being defensive about it?
Okay.
And I just think it is sad
Okay,
when
Paul.
one looks at who you are and what you represent.
Okay, Paul.
And clearly you have failed South Africa.
Okay, that's Paul in KZN. Thank you very much. Let's go to Tsepo in Soweto. Hello, Tsepo.
Mr. Kuala and Mr. Ramaphosa.
Hi, welcome.
I'm one of those who are saying South Africa right now we are lacking leadership. But here's my question to Mr. Ramaphosa. Since now that we know you are a shareholder with Landmin, your decision with Mr. Malem would really have been different if you were not a shareholder, since he was one of those who are calling for nationalization of the mines. And secondly, is it not a conflict of interest where you said for this appeal when you knew that your conflict could be as a result of him as well-known advocate of nationalizing mines, and you said there, and still in your wording of your report on that day, you were harsh, your words were harsh, and wouldn't that have taken a new course if you allowed somebody away from the ANC, and which has also caused why the miners left NUM and said, on our own, let's go and fight, and cost us 40 to 50 dead people.
All right, Tsepo in Soweto, thank you. Let's take one last call then before we get responses. Anthony in Oudtshoorn, good morning.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Firstly, just a comment, I think that leadership involves talking accurately about levels of pay and so on. And I don't think enough of the reportage, let's talk about reportage, has done that. I mean, let's talk about the level of pay of miners. Peter Major, who's an analyst, I heard him recently saying that actually the miners on the whole in Lonmin and the platinum industry are not badly paid. In terms of international benchmarks, they are above average in the world. And if you look also in South Africa at how many people are actually employed, the median wage in South Africa of employed people, the miners that we're talking about are actually close to the top 20% of earners in South Africa. So, I mean, I think one must get that in perspective. Yes, I agree. I think the mine bosses are probably rewarding themselves too well. But, I mean, the miners are not badly paid.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to comment on is that the conditions of living, as Mr. Ramaphosa mentioned, there would have been single-sex hostels there. They would have been done away with because everyone objected to them as sort of apartheid relics and everything. But, they're now going to come back. And because a lot of the people don't actually want to be migrants. I know it's a structural problem in South Africa, but a lot of the folk there don't want to invest in the area, don't want to bring their family up there.
Okay.
They want to remain migrants. They come from Lesotho, they come from Pondoland and so on. So they would choose to take the living out allowance and live in a shack to maximize any disposable money in their pocket.
Okay, Anthony, thank you very much for those points. Mr. Ramaphosa, Paul, Tsepo, and Anthony.
Oh, well, the first question from the first caller was that I'm being defensive, and I would have thought that in giving these answers, one was giving a clearer explanation, and I believe that workers really need and should be paid a fair wage and should be given really good conditions under which they work, and that their demands are demands that are reasonable considering the type of work that they do and the dangerous conditions that they work in. And I'm one of those who say that the living conditions where miners are working should be improved, and Marikana should be a turning point where mining companies don't opt for easy solutions, where they say, but having given you a living out allowance, thank you very much, we really don't care much about where you live and how you live. That should change, and we should see a change in the migratory labor system. And in fact, it needs to be completely overhauled. I agree to that. Those workers who want to live on a single basis should be given an option to do so, and should not just be giving a living out allowance. They should be given decent accommodation where the employer has brought them. So they should get good, a good place where they sleep and really good nutrition. And that should be the employer's responsibility. And in this regard, all employers should act collectively, and they should act collectively also in a collaborative way with government.
Sure.
So
But
I don't believe I'm being defensive.
Yeah, but where he says you're being defensive is he says you're criticizing the wage settlement that was reached on Tuesday, and he says it's the victory for the workers. Why should it be setting a bad precedent, as you say, President?
Well, you see, I'm rather articulating what the General Secretary of the Federation that leads more than 2.5 million workers is saying. This is what Vavi said. He says it sets a dangerous precedent. And I'm afraid I have to differ with the caller. I do believe it sets a bad precedent. What the workers achieved could have been done in a different way, in following the prescribed procedure that is set out. But we agree that Marikana was different. But in terms of the wage settlement itself, I'm not being defensive, because I do believe that it's
Sure,
a settlement that takes us forward.
Sure.
And the next caller then, I think, confuses what has happened in my activities in the ANC with this. And he says that there's a conflict of interest. Would I have taken the same decision? And I must say that I don't take decisions. We work as a committee, and there is a structure. And I, being a disciplined member of the ANC, work in terms of all those structures. And I don't think I'd like to get into that case at all and even begin to answer that type of question, because this is about Marikana.
So it's got nothing to do with Julius.
It's got nothing to do with Julius. And the NDCA case that we handled has nothing whatsoever to do with our shareholding in Lonmin. And the last caller on the migratory labor system, and as I said, it should be the responsibility of the company that brings workers into an outlying area like a mining complex to look after the workers and to make sure that there is accommodation. When the migrant labor system, forced workers into hostels, the employers built those hostels and looked after the living conditions as well as the nutrition of the workers. Right. Now, living out allowance is in the end an easy way out. And we need to review that, and we need to do what is done in other countries. Australia is a very good case in point, where workers are accommodated in outlying areas, and they're given decent accommodation in single quarters, and they're given the opportunity to go home regularly to be with their families. And that is something that needs to be looked at.
I'm going to go to the lines again in a minute, but let me read some SMSs first. Jay in Durban says, this is one of the most saddest interviews you've had. There's also another one from Durban that says, deep down in you, you know that you never raised the money for mining, but it was given to you by the ANC. That is why they don't know what to do about Marikana. That's an SMS from Durban. Miles Budu says, I'm humbled by Cyril's subsidized arrogance following his grandstanding during reading his verdict of Malema's demise. That's Miles Budu. Another one says, also, white owners of Lonmin must be invited and asked as well about their involvement. That's an SMS there. It's not signed. Kulegan in Newcastle, though, says, is it true that at one stage of your life you received a scholarship from the Oppenheimer family? Another one says, ask Cyril if he also regrets his 30-room farm. How can Mr. Ramaphosa be blamed? He's a shareholder, not the owner. That's Emma. Can somebody explain what the workers' conditions at African Rainbow Mine or Mvelapande are? What are they paid as well? Says an SMS. Another one from Bumi Qilibe in PE. Cyril rejected non-racialism in PE in the 80s when we invited him and Noom to join us. When and why did he change his mind? Okay, just broadly, if you may, just respond to this, because there are just a lot of SMSs about a lot of different things.
Yeah. I never received a scholarship from the Oppenheimers, nor from Anglo-American. My parents paid for my education, and I took a loan, which I paid over a very long time. So that association is completely not true. And about being the saddest interview, I think this is a very sad occasion for all of us, and it gives us an opportunity to reflect. And I'm not going to run away or try to hide from some of these issues. I mean, they have to be faced, and the task of leadership requires that one needs to face up to some of these things and the criticisms as well. So I'm not going to do that. And what are the conditions at Velapanda or African Rainbow Minerals? I don't know. But all I know is that the conditions in the mining industry are not what they should be. That one will admit.
Let me read some emails. There's one here from Professor Habib, and we spoke to him a little earlier on. Adam Habib has sent me an email. He says, just coming back to the pricing of platinum, if De Beers could do it for diamonds, it could be done for platinum if the government were to lead. And this is the issue that we spoke about earlier on, about being price takers and price in the issue of the pricing. Obviously, it would have to be balanced as against global demand. But this could be done. Why not bring together wise minds to think through how this could be done constructively? If we don't think outside the box and rewrite the rules, we will not be able to address our challenges. Also, we cannot continue benchmarking executive salaries on a global scale and then do not do the same for the workers. This breeds inequality, polarizes our society, and could ultimately destroy our future. And that's the issue. Pricing, and also the issue of the salaries for the executives, Mr. Ramaphosa.
I agree with Habib. I think we should have a debate about South Africa being a price taker on a metal that they control so effectively, which I think there's an argument to be made for price setting, and we need to look at a whole range of things. And De Beers is a case in point, as Professor Habib says. So there is something there, and I agree with him that we need some wise minds to look at this whole process. With regard to benchmarking salaries, I couldn't agree more. I think salaries do need to be benchmarked. I know it happens in other industry. In the auto industry it happens. In the paper-making industry it happens, where you benchmark the salaries of all the workers, right from top executives right to the bottom, where you say, what does a German worker earn doing exactly the same work? What does a worker in Russia earn doing the same type of work?
Will it be sustainable, though, for the industry? Because, for instance, let's take the mining industry and use Australia as an example. Miners, they get paid well, and it's a known fact. Can we afford, or can the industry afford?
Well, the difference between us and Australia, amongst other things, would be maybe their cost structure is much lower, and in the end, their salaries are higher because they've got fewer workers working in their mines, because they've mechanized. And we are not a mechanized mining industry, and in the end it results in us employing many more workers than they do. The same obtains in America, the same obtains in places like Russia. So there is a difference. So we will need to weigh all that up to see to what extent you can benchmark all those salaries against what we have here.
Let's take some calls, starting with Bukhosi in Kelvin. Hello, Bukhosi.
Peter.
Baba.
Yeah, all I want to note from Cyril is, why is he so much against nationalization? It tends to be a sore weight here in South Africa, but it's working in Botswana. Botswana, De Beers, there is 50% owned by government and 50% by the company. Letseng Diamond is the same thing. Recently, Zimbabwe has entered into a similar type of an arrangement. He sits on the NEC of the African National Congress. Why is he not having enough influence as a leader to make sure that the ANC black government effectively implements the mining charter
Okay, Bukhosi.
and corrects the living conditions of the people in the mines.
Okay, thank you very much, Bukhosi and Calvin. Let's go to Sebastian in Cape Town. Hello, Sebastian.
Yes, good morning to you both.
Hi.
Just regarding the comparisons with Australia which have been raised, there was a mining expert on one of the morning programs very recently who said the Australian miner gets well over $100,000 per year. The New Zealand miner gets $80,000 per year. Even if our miners get the 12,500 rand that they want, and I'm not sure that they've got it, they are getting $18,000 a year. I mean, the difference is horrendous. And your earlier caller basically said we hire by international standards, was talking absolute nonsense. We're living in a globalized world where globalized commodity prices apply throughout the world. So our miners have to buy their wheat, their grain, their maize in international prices, everything, their petrol, their transport costs. We are being paid slave wages in this country, and the only way we can get to a decent wage level is either to increase the nominal wages exponentially or revalue our currency. And
all right, Sebastian.
And that's the only route to go, is to revalue the rand upwards to greatly.
Okay, Sebastian in Cape Town, I've got to thank you. Let me just quickly move to Mashaba in Cape Town. Hello, Mashaba.
Hi, thanks, Koran, for taking my call. Koran, just a quick comment from me.
Yeah.
The question that I want to ask Mr. Ramaphosa is, I understand that he says that, the conditions that the mining is to be changed. To me, Koran, this is a ridiculous statement. As a person who has been in ANC long before even the ANC, took over the government, these people knew all these things all the time. For over 30 years, they've been knowing these things. And now he wants to come to the radio as if, he only learned yesterday that the mining conditions need to be changed. To me, this is not a statement that should be coming from a leader.
Okay.
And secondly, people that have been saying, according to the international rates and whatever, how the miners are being paid, good rates. Those people forget that, in South Africa, the conditions are different. We have loan sharks in the term of labor brokers that take huge part of the money that should be going to the mine.
Okay, Mashaba in Cape Town, thank you. Let's quickly then wrap it up with GM in Thohoyandou. Good morning to you, GM.
Morning.
Hi, I'm very well.
Yes, Kolani and Umatabela. The issue is that the problem is in South Africa is that the government is having a good policy, but on the implementing side is a very big problem. Like we ourselves, we the people with the persons living with disability. Can you try to check but I said that in mining we can't find even any administrator, anyone who is having a disability. All over, but they are saying every sector, everyone, you need 2%. And we have the big problem. We are asking you to try to drive this issue so that we have a good implementation.
Fantastic. GM, in Thohoyandou, we got the point. Please respond for me, Mr. Ramaphosa.
On the question of nationalization, the ANC has taken a decision that, a policy like nationalization is something that can be considered if everything stacks up under conditions that could make that option to work. And we have a mixed economy in the end. And there are certain entities that are private, that are owned also jointly by government. And we have a diamond mine that is now owned by government, Alexco. And if in the end it can be proven that a nationalized, say, mine could operate a lot better and it can yield the type of results that we want for our people, then by all means. The issue, though, has been you nationalize without compensation, and I would say that would go against the tenets of our constitution. But a Botswana example is a very good one, and indeed that has worked extremely well. And if it could work in our country, yes, by all means, it's something that can be considered. We live in a globalized world, and that is absolutely true. And we would like wages to be increased, and indeed, everybody would like to earn a much higher wage. In the end, everything has to stack up. If we increase wages, we've got to make sure that we do not, in the end up with a company that will go under. I think there should be shared value. There should be a value that is shared by all parties. As shareholders also benefit, so must the workers benefit. And in fact, I would like to see a situation where poor people and working people benefit a lot more from enterprises that we're all involved in. And we should move away from this whole notion of paying slave wages. People need to earn a living wage so that they can feed their families as well.
I've got to wrap up. I've got less than a minute. But I would like just to come back to some of the issues that we've been talking about. I mean, in showing solidarity with the workers, do you think that, as Mr. Ramaphosa, perhaps you should consider stepping down as the non-executive director at Lonmin?
It's quite easy. I'm not tied to that position. I could step down any time, any minute, and one hopes that whoever will then come in will also advocate good conditions for workers, and I could do that today.
But are you considering your role within the mining sector given this issue?
I think there's still a lot of value that one can add in the mining sector. And no, I'm not considering that, because we'd like to invest more, because this is an industry that has a future.
And just finally, in your mind, is there anybody that you think should take blame for Marikana? Is there any specific, whether Lonmin as a company, whether the police, is there anyone in your mind that you, when you at home reflecting on this issue, say you are to blame for all of this?
I think a lot of us as stakeholders are to blame. Marikana should not have happened. We're all to blame, and there are many stakeholders that should take the blame. But taking the blame should mean that we should make sure that it never, ever happens again.
Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thanks indeed. Thank you very much for listening to the program. Thanks for all the SMSs, emails as well. Thanks to the team who put it all together for us today. Producers Bongile Nhlapo, Mabubuluga, Tracy Boomgard, and Wisani Makubela. Senior producer Lungile Mabaso, technical producer Mark Prella today. Forum at 8 producer Jake Mugoma, chief producer Botsido Goto, executive producers Bosi Chane and Obrisichi. Olani Gwala will be back again for you then tomorrow, 6 to 9 here on SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. It is 9 o'clock, and that means time for morning talk. Cheers. It's 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 time